Welcome back to Northwest Elite Spirit, the channel you come to train your mind, body, and spirit. I'm Coach Brian. If you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, do that now. This is what I'm going to call Journey to Ultra Running, and it's my review of an excerpt from Journey to Ixtlan, the chapter A Warrior's Last Stand. And in this chapter, Don Juan takes Carlos on a very arduous and hard hike. But amidst the hike, he puts him through some practices that are great for pacing an ultra runner, in my opinion. I've been ultra running for a few years now, and I've learned a few things, and these lessons tie in very well with those experiences. In the beginning, they hop in the car and they drive for like 4 hours. And if you've ever been involved in any ultra running, so you're on a crew or you're a pacer or something like this, or you're the event organizers and having to drive out supplies, you end up doing a lot of driving. 4 hours, I don't imagine, would be unheard of. And along the way, Carlos's windshield gets caked with dust and bugs, and he says he's gonna have to stop and get out and clean the windshield. Don Juan tells him, we're on a hunt for power, everything counts, and we cannot stop. We have to keep going until we reach our destination. And not only is this applicable to ultra running, because if you're on a crew and you have a runner coming into an aid station at a planned time, you can't stop to take care of things that don't matter. You have to get up there and you have to meet your ultra runner because they need their food, they need their hydration, they may need their foot care, or just they may need their crew there for moral support, and so you have to get there. So Don Juan tells them, we're not stopping until we get there, even if you have to drive at 2 miles an hour staring out the side. And that's what Carlos ends up having to do. He's staring out he's got the door open and he's looking out the side and driving. And they get to where they're going to park. Don Juan tells them to get out. They get out and Carlos, distracted, starts looking around to see. It's so dark that he's trying to see if he could see anything with his headlights. And Don Juan says, we're in a hurry. We have to be somewhere. Don't be distracted, basically. Let's get going. And so Carlos begins to get ready. Don Juan hands Carlos his provisions, and Carlos drops them. And he says it's not out of not being able to see, though it is dark. He has a certain sense of nervousness, and this nervousness is causing him to be clumsy. So again, this is something that can happen not only in ultra running, when you say you pull into an aid station, or even at the very beginning when you're trying to get prepared and you're just dropping things and missing things, forgetting things because of nervousness, not because of tiredness or because you can't see or anything like that, but because of nervousness and lack of attention. So this is a great lesson towards focusing and having confidence in what's going on. And so now they're going to get ready to head out. And Don Juan tells Carlos that they are on a hunt for power and everything that they do counts. And so he instructs Carlos to match his footsteps. And he lines him up like a soldier. And I think he says the right foot out in front of the left foot. And then and Don Juan matches that in front of him. And he tells Carlos that since Don Juan has power, if Carlos steps where he steps, he's going to transmit that power to Carlos. And this is another thing that can sound mystical and whatnot, but if we are imitating somebody who is better at something than us, then that power that they hold within themselves is actually transmitted to us. And imitation is a great way to have that power or that knowledge transmitted to us. And so as far as how that translates into ultra running. Carlos says, like, he has him lined up like a soldier, and this is how I trained myself to go further. Was I adopted the hut 2-3-4 pace, and I adopted the mechanics of marching. I wouldn't call my 200 milers or my 100 milers runs. I would call them forced marches. And then with hut 2-3-4, and then with the mechanics of a march, they come to where they're about to start hiking. And Don Juan tells Carlos to line up with him and put his feet exactly where Don Juan's feet land, and not to look to the right or to the left, but to focus on where Don Juan puts his feet in order for them to make it. And so they start doing that. Don Juan starts moving. Carlos is placing his feet where Don Juan's feet are. After about 30 yards, Carlos looks off to the side and ends up bumping into Don Juan. And Don Juan tells him seriously, like, first jokingly, if you're going to be stumbling around like this, one of us is going to get hurt. And so then he says seriously, he does not want to be hurt by his stupidity or his lack of concentration. And again, they're out in the wild, and so you have to be paying attention and not distracted. And if I am distracted out in the wild and bumping into my partner, I can get my partner hurt, or I can get myself hurt, or I can get us both hurt, and that can end in catastrophe for us. And then in training with other people, to learn how to be a better pacer, I would follow behind somebody and I would match their footfalls. I would place my foot where they place their foot. I would match their cadence. And in this way, I got a good idea of their flow. And so when they began to lag behind, I could pull in front and pull them at their own pace without them knowing it, and without them having to try very hard. And I've gotten compliments about my pacing style where people would say like they would feel like they could go all day long. And that's what I'm aiming for. That's what I'm aiming for in my running, going all day long. And if I'm helping somebody out, I'm aiming for a cadence and a motion that can help them go all day long. And Carlos, he comments on that. He said, even though he began to feel exhausted, at one point, something took over and he felt like he was being pulled like outside of his own volition. Like he wasn't the one moving himself. He was the one being pulled. And so that's what I'm aiming for with my pacing. And that's what I would ask for from somebody pacing me. And then we get into the communication from Don Juan. So they're moving along, and Don Juan says to Carlos, we're going to stop in a bit. And so, this might seem to some people like they're being talked down to, but when you're hiking really far or running really far, you would think it'd be easy to stop. Like, we're just going to stop. So we're moving along and we're just going to stop. But when you're exhausted, you can't just stop. You will collapse and you can end up hurting yourself. And so Don Juan tells him we're going to stop so Carlos can wind down and then come to a stop. Tells him if he needs to go to the bushes, do that now because the next haul is like a hard one. And they stop for like 15 minutes. And so people that haven't tested themselves like this may say, well, if he's exhausted, why wouldn't you rest longer? There's a saying in ultra runner community, and there's a guy named John Parks, he says it a lot, and that's how it's stuck in my head. Beware the chair. So the longer you sit, the longer you want to sit, and the harder it is to get up and keep going. And so you do what you got to do, and you get up and you go. And so again, Don Juan is an excellent teacher with this. And so they go. So they get going again, and when they get near to where they're going to stop and do their search for their omen, Don Juan jumps out of the way. And Carlos's momentum, though he's exhausted and doesn't have much energy at all, and his legs are about dead, his momentum carries him about another 20 yards, and then he collapses. And his legs are shaking, and he's perspiring, and he feels like there's no way he could go any further. And Don Juan situates him to where he's in the most restful position he can be in, and he quickly recovers. And Don Juan tells him that they're on a search for an omen, and this omen's going to tell them if Carlos can continue to hunt for power. Carlos says that he knows that the omen won't come because he has little power, little confidence, little faith. And Don Juan says, I know it will come because I have more power than you. And he laughs at that. And what I think he means by that is that he has more belief or more knowledge. Like Don Juan knows more about the possibilities out here in these areas than Carlos. And also more belief. Belief is power. And the belief, it's not just belief, it's belief through knowledge. Don Juan has practiced enough things that he knows what will happen, and so he believes through knowledge, not just blind faith. And the omen that Don Juan expects to come, and you'll have to go back and listen to that chapter, A Warrior's Last Stand from Journey to Ixtlan in my video history here. You'll have to go watch that. The omen that Don Juan expects doesn't come, but another one comes. And again, Carlos is like arguing about what's what there, and Don Juan has to kind of like run him through these things that that prove to him that, again, Don Juan knows what he's talking about. So once the omen appears, Don Juan gives Carlos both a mental and physical task for him to perform. And it's another exhausting task. It involves Don Juan's throwing these rocks down to Carlos from up above, and they're like bouncing off other rocks, and Carlos is discerning the very rock that Don Juan threw down to him, and he's placing them in a certain order. And then Don Juan checks to see if he's done it right, and when the task is complete, Carlos will have, passed that little test. And Carlos does. He's exhausted mentally and physically, and yet he's still able to complete the task. And I think that's why Don Juan chose Carlos as a student, because though Carlos is argumentative and stubborn and often petty and manipulative, he has this drive in him where he wants to complete these tasks that he is given. And I think that's something that can help all of us if we can be, and I don't mean task-oriented towards tasks, like menial tasks or meaningless tasks, but tasks towards something that we are personally getting at rather than tasks somebody else is giving us. Though Don Juan is giving him these tasks, these are tasks that are driving Carlos towards his own personal inclinations rather than something outside of himself. So after Carlos completes that task, he ends up laying down on this bed that Don Juan made for him, and he falls asleep. He wakes up and Don Juan's not there, and he has some anxiety, but he lays back down and feels some relief, and he looks out and he sees this beautiful desert land. And I'll say, again, referring to ultra running, in the beginning of my Moab 240 adventure, not long into it, I looked out at the clouds and, man, looked to my right, and there's this burst of clouds, and the way the clouds were just coming at me, it was like an explosion of colors and cloud and beauty, sunlight, all these things mixed together. And it was so beautiful, and I was not far into the run at all. I wasn't exhausted, I wasn't delirious or anything like that. And I wept at the beauty of it. It was truly magnificent. maybe it had something to do with like pursuing my passions and a sense of adventure and being out in the desert and all these things that, breathing the air and all that. But I wept, and it was an awesome experience, and I'm looking forward to experiencing that. So then, having experienced all that and having experienced the omen, Don Juan tells Carlos that I'm giving you this land to use. Every worm, every bush, every rock is here for your use. And Carlos refers it to the conquistadors when they would come and look in a direction and claim the land all in one direction. And Don Juan says that's a good idea. And he says, so I'm going to give you this land. And Carlos says, well, you don't own the land, so you can't give it to me. And Don Juan says, well, the Spaniards didn't own it, and yet they did it. But Don Juan discerns what he means. It's all yours for your use. You can come here, and you can gain power here, and you can gain insight here. That's what it's for. Not necessarily to own, like dig up or harvest or anything like that. But, though he probably could harvest some plants there. But to come there and contemplate and meditate and rest and gain power. And after he explains that to him, he asks him how his dreaming is going, because he gave him the task of going to certain places in his dreams. And this is something I've been trying to practice since reading this, and I haven't been able to do it yet that I can remember. And Carlos is saying he has been able to go to certain places, schoolyard, things like this. And so he normally goes to these places at the time of day he would normally be there. So if he's dreaming about the schoolyard, he's dreaming about the schoolyard. Even if he's sleeping at night and dreaming about the schoolyard, he dreams that he's there in the day. And Don Juan tells him to get more sense of control over your dream state is if you're dreaming at night, be in the schoolyard at night or wherever it is you are. If you're dreaming during the day about somewhere you would normally be there at night, dream about being there during the day. And he tells him that will help him travel to this spot, like in his imagination or in his dream, the spot they're in right now on this hilltop. So if he's dreaming of the hilltop during the day, he needs to be in the dream at the hilltop during the day. And if he's dreaming the hilltop at night, he needs to be on the hilltop at night. And looking around and memorizing everything in the area, which Don Juan runs him through that, just through eyes and like pointing with his chin, telling him to like look, having him look at and memorize the surroundings. That way when he dreams, he can draw himself to that place by memorizing a certain object. And again, he gives him that advice for his dreams. So if you were going to your schoolyard, what is somewhere in your schoolyard that you could connect to and will draw you to that in your dream? And then Don Juan is telling him that in his last dance, since this is Carlos's personal place of power in his last dance, or when he dies, this is like where his spirit will go and live out and act out like his life. You know how they say your life passes before your eyes? This is the place where that will happen, and his death will watch. And I have a place of power that I've gone to, and I talked about it in the past, where I had like this grand vision through practicing cloud watching and then using my imagination, where this pretty vivid scene came to me. And so before that, before that scene, there were other things that happened. I discovered that place. I went there, and I would pull into this little hidden area behind all the brush, and I could park my car there. I could take a nap, or I could camp, or whatever. But at night, late at night, I would go out into the prairie and into the wild, up into the forest, and I would just, meditate or walk around, and I'd have some pretty cool experiences. I think my first one was, I went out there. I don't have glasses on now because I dropped them in the woods and lost them, but I would go out. I went out into this place without glasses, and which gives me the confidence to do it now and not worry so much about having dropped them. and to run at night. And everything was just, it was a cloudy, stormy night, and everything just kind of, it looked like somebody took their fingers and ran them through some sort of like somebody painted a scene of like this place at night in all grays and black and like just a hint of green because it's all green, and like they took their hands and smudged it. So everything was smudged together, the clouds, the trees, the ground, the rocks, the light, everything was smudged together. And it was a really powerful experience, and I could walk around even though everything was like really blurry. I could walk around freely without any worry until I got a sense of an animal nearby, and then I hurried up and got back to my car. And then I found a deer carcass fairly close to my car. Got out of my car and smelled something and searched around in the brush and found a deer carcass. So I think there was a cougar out there, and having sensed it, that's what had me rush back to my car. And then another night, like Carlos talks about in a past video, how there's like a beam or a straight shot that comes across, and for him it forms this bridge that turns into a vision of his. This one didn't turn into a vision, but I was out there one stormy night, and there was a break in the clouds during the moonlight, and the moonlight broke through like a flat stream, like almost like something you could walk on a sidewalk or something. Broke through the clouds in a flat stream and came down and touched the ground in front of me. So the light was splayed out in front of me, very sharp, very clean, like slate of light. And that was really cool. So this is the place where I have a lot of powerful experiences and visions. And if this last stand is something that's going to happen to me, like my spirit will go somewhere. Maybe this place will be it. I believe it. It's a place where my family came up. So I could say this is where my ancestors walked. And so I walk here too, quite by accident, but nonetheless, I'm on that, like walking in their footsteps, so to say, and being transmitted something from them in that area, so to speak. So this is Coach Brian with Northwest Elite Spirit. Again, if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, do that now. Journey to Ultra Running, from an excerpt from Journey to Ixtlan, A Warrior's Last Stand by Carlos Castaneda. For access to my suggested library, my blog, Northwest Elite Spirit merchandise, and to be trained by me online personally, go to northwestelitespirit.com. Thank you.